Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Easy English Room podcast. I'm your host, Emma, and as always, I'm joined here by my co-host, Henry. We're both speaking to you from London, and we're really happy to have you with us again today.
Hi, everyone. It's fantastic to be back. Emma, I have to say, I'm genuinely excited about today's topic. In fact, it's something that, when you think about it, plays a huge role in all of our lives, even more than we sometimes realize. It affects our daily routines, our decisions, and even our long-term goals.
That's so true. So today, we're going to explore discipline and self-control. We'll be sharing a few personal experiences, offering some practical tips, and of course, keeping things light and enjoyable while helping you improve your English at the same time. So, Henry, shall we dive right in?
Yes, absolutely. Let's get started. And to everyone listening, just a quick reminder. Our goal here is to make learning English both simple and engaging. If you manage to pick up even one new expression or idea today, then we've done something right. Also, before we move on, don't forget there's a free PDF available with all the key points from this episode. You'll find it in the description below, and it's really useful if you want to review everything later at your own pace.
All right then, Henry, let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled to stay away from your phone when you really needed to concentrate on work or something important?
Oh, Emma, honestly, that's a dangerous question. I feel like my phone has this invisible force pulling me towards it. I mean, let's be honest. Who hasn't said, I'll just check one quick message, and then suddenly, somehow, an entire hour has disappeared? It's almost unbelievable how quickly time passes.
I completely agree. It's almost like a trap. One moment you're just replying to a message, and before you know it, you've fallen into a loop of watching cute dog videos or scrolling endlessly. It happens so easily, doesn't it?
Exactly. And actually, it's not only about phones. If you think about it more broadly, it could be anything. Food, video games, or even something as simple as pressing the snooze button again and again in the morning. Staying in control of our impulses is genuinely challenging.
That's a really important point. And in a way, that's precisely why today's topic matters so much. These are everyday struggles that we all face, regardless of where we are, even here in London. The good news, though, is that we can learn how to manage them step by step.
So, to begin with, let's try to understand what discipline and self-control actually mean. Emma, how would you personally define discipline?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'd say discipline is about doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel motivated at all. For example, imagine a cold Monday morning in London. You're warm and comfortable in bed, and the last thing you want to do is get up. Still, you push yourself to get up because you know you have responsibilities. That, to me, is discipline in action.
That really paints a clear picture. I know that feeling all too well, especially when the bed feels extra cozy. In fact, I used to struggle quite a lot with waking up early for workouts. What helped me was setting my alarm for 5:30 a.m. and placing it across the room. That way, I had no choice but to physically get out of bed to turn it off. Interestingly, once I was already standing, it became much easier to just continue with my morning routine. It's amazing how such a small adjustment can make a big difference.
That's a clever strategy, and it shows something important. Discipline often starts with small, practical changes. Now, on the other hand, self-control is slightly different. It's more about resisting temptations, especially when you know something isn't good for you. For instance, saying no to an extra slice of pizza when you're trying to eat healthier. It's not always easy, but with time and practice, it definitely becomes stronger.
That reminds me of something I went through recently. Last month, I decided to reduce my caffeine intake. I used to stop at my favorite coffee shop every morning on my way to work here in London. The smell of fresh coffee was incredibly tempting. However, I kept telling myself, just walk past it today. At first, it felt really difficult, but after about a week, it became noticeably easier. It's quite surprising how those little wins can gradually build your self-control.
That's such a great example. In fact, those little wins really do add up over time. It's similar to when you're trying to focus on work, but your phone keeps buzzing. You feel curious, of course, but you choose not to check it immediately. The more often you resist, the stronger your discipline becomes.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key idea, consistency. This is where habits come in. When something becomes a habit, you don't have to think about it as much. For example, if you make it a routine to go for a walk every evening after dinner, eventually it just becomes a natural part of your day.
That's very true. Habits are almost like shortcuts for the brain. Once something turns into a habit, it requires much less effort. I remember a friend of mine who wanted to read more but always said he didn't have enough time. So he started keeping a book in his car. Whenever he was waiting to pick up his child from school, he would read a few pages. Over time, this small action became a habit, and now he reads several books every month.
That's a fantastic story, and it really highlights an important idea. Habits don't need to be big to be effective. In fact, starting small is often the best approach. If someone tries to go from doing no exercise at all to running 5 miles every day, they'll probably give up quickly. But if they begin with a short jog around the block, it feels much more manageable and realistic.
Absolutely. And those small steps can lead to big results over time. It's similar to saving money. At first, putting aside a small amount each week might not seem significant. However, after a few months, you'll notice that it has grown into something meaningful. And actually, this connects nicely to another concept, delayed gratification.
Yes, delayed gratification is such an important idea. It's basically about choosing to wait for a better reward in the future instead of taking an immediate one. For example, deciding not to buy an expensive gadget now so that you can save up for a holiday later. Of course, waiting isn't easy, especially when you really want something right away.
I completely agree. I actually learned this lesson during my time at university. I was saving money for a spring break trip, and that meant I had to skip some nights out with friends. At the time, it felt quite difficult because I didn't want to miss out, but I knew that if I kept spending, I wouldn't reach my goal. In the end, when I finally arrived at the beach, it felt incredibly rewarding.
That makes perfect sense. It reminds me of the famous marshmallow experiment with children. They were given a simple choice: eat one marshmallow immediately or wait for a short time and receive two instead. On the surface, it sounds easy, but in reality, it's about learning patience and self-control. And in a way, we all face similar choices in our daily lives.
And, it's not only connected to money or material possessions. In fact, it can also relate to your health and daily habits. For instance, choosing to skip dessert because you're working toward a fitness goal is a great example. At the beginning, it might feel like you're giving something up or missing out. However, as time goes on and you begin to notice real progress, maybe you feel stronger, lighter, or more energetic, it suddenly becomes much easier to keep making that choice. In a way, the results themselves become your motivation. And interestingly, once you experience that positive change, saying no doesn't feel like a struggle anymore. It feels like a smart decision that supports your long-term well-being.
That's a really good point, Emma, and I completely agree. At the same time, though, staying disciplined isn't always simple or straightforward. There are definitely moments when it becomes quite difficult, especially during stressful periods. When life feels overwhelming, we often look for quick and easy comfort. For example, many people turn to junk food, scrolling endlessly on their phones, or binge-watching TV shows late into the night. It's almost like the brain is trying to protect us by giving us something enjoyable to reduce stress. However, while these habits may feel good in the short term, they don't always help us in the long run.
I completely understand what you're saying. Actually, I went through something very similar not long ago here in London. During last year's tax season, work became incredibly busy, and I found myself feeling quite overwhelmed. Because of that stress, I started eating more snacks than usual when I got home. At the time, it felt comforting and relaxing, almost like a reward after a long day. But later on, I realized that it wasn't truly helping me feel better overall. So I decided to make a change. Instead of reaching for snacks, I began exploring healthier ways to manage stress, such as going for a walk around my neighborhood or practicing simple breathing exercises. Gradually, those small changes made a noticeable difference in how I felt.
That sounds like a really thoughtful and effective approach, Emma. Finding healthier ways to deal with stress can truly transform your daily routine. Now, speaking of managing things more effectively, let's shift our focus a bit and talk about some practical strategies for building discipline. In many ways, developing discipline is quite similar to building a muscle. You can't expect immediate results. You need to start small, stay consistent, and gradually increase your effort over time.
That makes perfect sense. In fact, it's very similar to going to the gym. You wouldn't walk in on your first day and try to lift the heaviest weights available. Instead, you would begin with something light and manageable, and then slowly increase the intensity as you get stronger. The same idea applies to discipline. For example, if your goal is to wake up earlier, it's not realistic to suddenly set your alarm 2 hours earlier than usual. A more effective method would be to start with just 15 minutes earlier, then maybe 30 minutes, and continue building gradually. This way, the change feels natural rather than overwhelming.
That actually reminds me of a concept I once came across called habit stacking. Essentially, it means attaching a new habit to something you already do regularly. For instance, if you already make coffee every morning, you could use that time to stretch or do a quick exercise while the coffee is brewing. In that sense, you're not creating a completely new routine from scratch, you're simply adding something small to an existing habit, which makes the process feel much easier and more achievable.
That's such a useful technique. And I've actually tried something similar myself. I wanted to read more, but I always felt like I didn't have enough time. So I decided to read for about 10 minutes after lunch every day. Since I was already taking a break at that time, it didn't feel like an extra effort. Before long, it became part of my daily routine. Surprisingly, after a few weeks, I noticed that I was finishing one book every month. It really shows how small, consistent actions can lead to impressive results. And by the way, to our listeners, have you ever tried habit stacking? If so, we'd love to hear about your experiences, so feel free to share them with us.
Yes, definitely. We'd really enjoy hearing your stories. After all, these small habits may seem insignificant at first, but over time, they can build into something quite powerful. Little by little, they shape your lifestyle and make positive changes feel effortless.
Exactly. And that naturally brings us to another important topic, motivation and willpower. Motivation is fantastic when it comes to getting started. It gives you that initial push and excitement. However, the challenge is that motivation doesn't always last. On the other hand, willpower is what keeps you going, even on days when you don't feel particularly inspired.
I completely agree with that. Motivation often feels like a burst of energy at the beginning of a new goal or project. For example, think about New Year's resolutions. At the start of the year, especially now in 2026, people feel incredibly motivated and full of enthusiasm. But as time passes, that excitement can fade. I remember experiencing this myself. By February, I noticed that my motivation wasn't as strong as it had been in January. That's when I had to rely more on willpower to stay on track and continue working toward my goals.
That's a great example. In a way, motivation is like the spark that starts a fire, but willpower is what keeps that fire burning steadily. Since willpower is limited and can get weaker throughout the day, it's often a smart idea to tackle your most difficult tasks earlier when your energy and focus are at their highest.
That makes a lot of sense. And when your willpower begins to fade, small strategies can really help you stay on track. For instance, I sometimes reward myself after completing a challenging task. It could be something simple like enjoying a piece of dark chocolate or taking a short break. Even though it's a small reward, it gives me something to look forward to and keeps me motivated.
I do something very similar, actually. It's almost like giving yourself a little encouragement along the way. On top of that, another key factor that really supports discipline is mindfulness and self-awareness. When you become more aware of your habits, thoughts, and emotions, it becomes much easier to make better choices.
That's a really important point. For example, imagine you suddenly find yourself reaching for your phone out of boredom. If you're mindful, you can pause for a moment and ask yourself, do I really want to do this, or am I just avoiding something else? That simple pause can make a huge difference in your behavior.
Yes, exactly. That awareness is incredibly powerful. It's all about being present and truly noticing what you're doing. I used to eat snacks without even realizing it, especially when I felt stressed or anxious. But once I started practicing mindfulness, I became more conscious of those moments. Now, instead of automatically reaching for food, I take a few deep breaths or step outside for a short walk. It's a small change, but it has helped me a lot.
Mindfulness also plays a big role in improving self-control because it helps you recognize your triggers. For instance, if you know that you tend to lose focus when you're tired, you can plan ahead. You might take a short nap, stretch your body, or have a warm cup of tea before getting back to work.
In other words, it's about understanding your own patterns and working with them instead of against them.
That's absolutely right. It all comes down to knowing your strengths as well as your weaknesses. Once you're aware of the situations that challenge your self-control, you can prepare for them in advance. And that leads us nicely to another important idea: balancing discipline with flexibility.
Yes, maintaining discipline is important, but at the same time, it's equally important to be kind to yourself. Life doesn't always go according to plan, and that's completely normal.
I couldn't agree more. If you're too strict with yourself, you might feel frustrated or discouraged when things don't go perfectly. For example, if you miss a workout or don't follow your schedule exactly, it's not the end of the world. It simply means you need to adjust and move forward.
Exactly. Let's say you plan to go for a run, but the weather in London suddenly turns rainy and unpleasant. Instead of skipping exercise altogether, you could do a short workout at home. It may not be exactly what you planned, but it's still progress.
Yes, and that's the key idea. Discipline is about progress, not perfection. For instance, if you're trying to eat healthy but end up having pizza with friends one evening, it doesn't mean you failed. It just means you enjoyed a moment and you can continue your healthy habits the next day without guilt.
That's a great way to look at it. It's a bit like taking a different route when there's traffic. You're still moving toward your destination, you've just changed your path slightly to adapt to the situation.
I really like that comparison. Life isn't always a straight line, and being flexible while staying focused on your goals is what makes discipline truly effective and sustainable over time.
And with that, we've come to the end of today's discussion. We truly hope you found this conversation about discipline and self-control helpful, practical, and easy to follow.
Yes, and before we wrap things up, let's bring in Laura for our vocabulary breakdown. She'll go over some of the key words, useful phrases, and expressions we use today so you can understand them more clearly and start using them in your own conversations.
Thanks, Emma and Henry. Hi again, everyone. Let's go over some key words from today's conversation that you can use to improve your English. I'll explain their meanings and provide examples for everyday use. Discipline. Discipline means doing what you need to do even when you don't feel like it. It's about staying committed to your goals and following a routine. Example: waking up early every day requires a lot of discipline. Self-control. Self-control is the ability to resist temptations and avoid doing things you know aren't good for you. Example: it takes self-control to skip dessert when you're trying to eat healthy. Delayed gratification. Delayed gratification means waiting for a bigger or better reward instead of choosing something smaller immediately. Example: saving money for a vacation instead of buying a new phone is a great example. Hit snooze. To hit snooze means delaying getting up by pressing the snooze button on your alarm clock, usually because you want to stay in bed longer. Example: I hit snooze 3 times this morning because I didn't want to get up. Willpower. Willpower is the ability to control your actions, emotions, or urges, especially when you're tempted to do something else. Example: it takes a lot of willpower to keep studying while your friends are going out. Build up over time. When something builds up over time, it gradually increases or becomes stronger. Example: small savings can build up over time and turn into a large amount. Pat on the back. A pat on the back is a way of showing praise or approval. Example: after completing a big project, I gave myself a pat on the back. Manage stress. To manage stress means taking actions to reduce stress or cope with stressful situations. Example: exercise and meditation are effective ways to manage stress. Flexibility. Flexibility means being able to adapt to different situations or changes, and it is the opposite of being rigid. Example: it's important to have flexibility in your schedule in case something unexpected happens. So that covers all the key words, phrases, and idioms from today's conversation. I hope you found this helpful and feel more confident using these expressions.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was incredibly insightful and genuinely useful. I'm sure our listeners found your explanations clear and easy to follow. In fact, breaking down vocabulary like that really helps learners feel more confident when they try to use new words in real conversations. It's always great to take a moment to pause, reflect, and truly understand how language works in context.
Yes, absolutely, Lara. We really appreciate your contribution. Expanding your vocabulary is, without a doubt, one of the most important steps in improving your English. Not only does it help you understand others more easily, but it also allows you to express your thoughts more clearly and naturally. On top of that, the more words and phrases you learn, the more confident you become when speaking or writing.
All right, then. With that, we're coming to the end of today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion and picked up some useful ideas along the way. And just as a quick reminder, don't forget to download the PDF for this episode. It includes all the key vocabulary, helpful expressions, and a few practice exercises that we talked about today. It's a great way to review everything at your own pace and reinforce what you've learned.
That's right. And if you found this episode helpful or enjoyable, we'd really love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts or experiences. Also, give us a thumbs up. It really supports the channel. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. We've got plenty more content planned to help you continue improving your English step by step.
Thank you so much for listening and spending your time with us today. It truly means a lot. We'll see you again very soon with another episode. Until then, keep practicing regularly, stay motivated, and remember, even small progress each day brings you closer to fluency. Take your time, enjoy the process, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way.
Bye for now, everyone, and keep moving forward with your English goals. Before you go, don't forget that your learning journey doesn't end here. To keep improving, you can click on the next video or explore more lessons that we've carefully prepared for you. There's always something new to discover, so stay curious, keep learning, and most importantly, enjoy the process.